Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. In today's episode, Anthony Power and I are pleased to welcome Aydin Kilic, the CEO, and Frank Holmes, the Executive Chairman of HIVE Digital Technologies, back to the program. They just came out with Q1 earnings. We're excited to talk about the results along with strategy and outlook moving forward. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join. And let us know in the comments section below if you're currently holding shares of HIVE and what you thought about the results. With that being said, let's get into today's interview. All right, guys, away we go. We've got the team from HIVE Digital Technologies. They just came out with their Q1 earnings. We're going to be talking about that in addition to strategy and outlook. Aydin Kilic, CEO, and Frank Holmes, Executive Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you so much for making the time.
Happy to be here.
Be with you again.
Of course. Hey, now we wanted to get into a number of questions during today's discussion, but before we do, obviously, the biggest story of the year, I guess, with HIVE is the hash rate growth, the aggressive growth rate you guys have been putting online here. Can you talk to us about getting in addition or in excess of 15 exahash, what this really does for the company?
Yeah, I think I just want to jump in to say that, HIVE is one of the few companies that's globally with two powerful growth engines. And it's a Bitcoin mining, there's no doubt, and I can give you more this granularity of the margin expansion and the HPC strategy, which we're enjoying. So I think it's just together the dual business position HIVE is a unique, diversified growth story that is capturing the imagination. But it appears to me that AI seems to be the bigger driver of capturing imagination when it should be the revenue and the Bitcoin you're able to hold on your portfolio if you're a Bitcoin miner. So it's interesting, we're dealing with both, and the scaling of Bitcoin mining has been phenomenal. I didn't explain how this expanded.
Yeah, I think when you look at, we put out a 15 exahash update last week, and our average for the quarter period in June was actually about 8.7 exahash. And you got to think about that. We started bringing hash rate on in May, right? We had this unprecedented growth. And so, but when you look at the average for the quarter, it's about 8.7 exahash. Since June 30th, we've grown all the way to 15 exahash. Now, earlier this morning, I love my numbers. Excel is my favorite program. So I was sort of running a projection on what our average should be for this quarter, right? Because we'll be at 18 by the end of the summer, right? We're at 15 now and stand by for updates. I expect our average operating hash rate this quarter to be not too far off from 15 exahash. So if you look at a quarter over quarter average, that will almost, not quite, but almost be double, right? Now, another way to look at it is we mined 406 Bitcoin last quarter. Well, in our July production update, actually, it was one of the analysts that pointed this out. It was very handy. We did 206 Bitcoin in July alone, right? So you could already see that production really ramp up. So, on a run rate basis, we're easily going to be doing 620 Bitcoin. It'll be more than that, obviously, because we've brought on more hash rate. So it was, I think, well documented in our earnings webcast. We're well over 300 million ARR. I think we put out in our production report for the 15 exahash, we're doing 7.5 Bitcoin a day. We're pushing, if you add up the HPC, right, we're pushing almost $1 million of daily revenue now, right? You look at the mining margin, we put those disclosures in, we're about 55%. That's just going to grow to 60. So if you're doing almost $200 million of gross mining margin on an annualized basis, we've still got about 50 million of Bitcoin on the HODL. We're still a relative bargain of 500 million. That's why the re-rating of the stock, I think, is incumbent. It's not a matter of if, but when. So I've been to New York a few times in the last few months, and we're talking to some of the really smart institutions, and some of them have taken positions in HIVE. I think everybody likes a good deal. As Frank said, there's a famous Warren Buffett quote, there's price and value, right? So there's what something costs and what it's really worth. So I think that people are soon to realize that all the value upside that we've got, especially when you consider the pledge buyback that we have for our Bitcoin, we have a path to get our HODL back to over 2,000. And the majority of that pledge was done at $87,000 Bitcoin. So there's a lot of this implicit value driving that we've done. I think the name of the game, the operative word for us is accretive, right? In scaling the business. And I believe that summarizes at a high level the strategy of how we've been scaling.
In terms of obviously the earnings that have just been released, can you sort of like give us some of the highlights from the earnings, and also just tell us more about how this immense increase of hash rate at the Iguazu site is helping you more now with your mining margins effectively?
Yeah, so hash price actually was down quarter over quarter. So it was 54 period end March. It was 51 period end June, right? So similar, but still down, roughly 5% quarter over quarter. Our gross operating margin was up 10% quarter over quarter. So we went from 28% period end March to 38% period end June. Again, we're bringing on S21 plus hydros, 15 joules a terahash. Again, we got those at $14 a terahash. That's a sub 1 year ROI after indicative 5-cent cost. And moreover, of course, the power cost in Paraguay is attractive. So that has all really helped our margin. And so in our press releases, we sort of provided a directional update going from 50 to 55 to 60% gross mining margin over this quarter. And so the other highlights are overall a $16 million gross operating margin for the quarter, 45, giving you round numbers here, 45 million adjusted EBITDA, and 35 million of net income just for the quarter, which I think is tremendous considering we've now adjusted to US GAAP, 435 Bitcoin in the treasury. And another metric that I think might get looked over from time to time is, again, we've led the sector in ROIC, and we did 15% ROIC in the trailing 12 months. And that figure is slated to go up because the capital we've deployed in the last 6 to 9 months, now that income is really starting to roll in as a hash rate comes online. So I think those are some of the highlights from the quarter. And moreover, our earnings per share was up. We're at 18% earnings per share this quarter as well, which I think was a really strong showing because it's a 206% increase year over year. And people have said, oh, you guys have issued shares. Of course, we've quadrupled our operating footprint. But you look year over year, and the share issuance has been 74%. So might I add that we're building and bringing online 300 megawatts of capacity of green energy Bitcoin mining, the land, the substations, and the buildings. So you do some quick math, 400 grand a megawatt, we've broadcast that metric, 300 megawatts, that's 120 million CapEx. So yeah, we've acquired and built and completed that. So of course, there's going to be some accretive investing done, which we've done strategically through the ATM. But one thing we put in the earnings webcast is we are not only fully funded, we've paid, all our ASICs are fully paid for. Our path from today to 15 to 25 exahash, we have ASICs coming in week over week between now and the end of September, early October. So we're well on our way. It's the rocket ship is
18-wheelers bringing in machines at 3 o'clock in the morning, and they're showing us the footage right away. Move them in. And in 6 hours, they've got those machines plugged in. And then in the morning call, we meet every morning and we get this call. And yes, we got those machines up and going. So it's very exciting. And I think giving the leadership role to Gabriel Lamas and letting him go ahead to run what he's got to do there has been a big win. And maybe previously he was sort of constrained with in the previous country he wasn't the country president. He didn't have the stewardship and leadership that we've offered him, and he's taken that ball and just taken it into the end zone, which is very, very exciting for us to see. But I think the other part I think Aydin was commenting on, that we've increased our shares outstanding with ATM Yeah, but our revenue grew accretively 65% per share. So that is very accretive when we go back and look at top line growth and bottom line growth. And you still look at the cost for us to go and build out data centers. They're extremely attractive. So I'm tip my hat to Aydin and the leadership they've shown, and with Gabriel and Luke. The three of them are talking all the time. They're doing a great job.
Now, in terms of that phenomenal growth that you've had and the investment you've put into Paraguay, as well as the investment into HPC, you obviously used a number of levers. You've talked about the ATM, but you mentioned in the earlier conversation about this pledging of Bitcoin to pay for, I believe, for the mining machines. Can you tell us, in terms of the amount of Bitcoin you've pledged? I think you mentioned there's a buyback there at a certain figure. And what are the time frames to do that? And effectively, how do you do that? So we sort of like, we get the all-encompassed answer.
Anthony, there's a secret sauce, because we go and tell everybody and immediately people front run us. We've had this experience too many times. And we purposely, made sure that when we did this deal, we did not disclose the fine parts. And then one of our peers went out and borrowed and pledged at Coinbase $200 million of Bitcoin and borrowed at 9%. We didn't. And that's what we do for our shareholders. So why should we give you all this granularity so you can turn around and copy what HIVE is doing? And so we become very sensitive over that. When I was in London 18 months ago, it was someone saying, oh yeah, we just followed the playbook of HIVE going into HPC and we went to Iceland. We just read your documents and watched you on these interviews of interviewing us. So we have to become, pretty sensitive over what we're doing. But it was great negotiations. It was a win-win for all parties, and Aydin did a great job in negotiating the granularity of that transaction. And we have the right, and we bought back some of it, but we want to be very cautious that we just don't make it easy for somebody else that pay themselves enormous amounts of RSUs that HIVE doesn't. We have the lowest G&A to mine a Bitcoin. We have the lowest G&A and still have to feel like we have to go to defend it while other people try to copy it. So it's sort of sensitive. I know your question is a great question, but we have to be cautious of what we disclose.
Okay. The anticipation is, though, that you will look to buy back, because it's 87,000.
Of course. It's not
We've been buying. Well, why not? We're up 50 million.
Yeah.
Yes, Anthony. So, we have different modalities, right? So we have cash flow from operations. We could buy it back iteratively. We could wait for the stock to re-rate and use equity on an accretive basis. But moreover, we're in a very good position. And to elaborate on Frank's point, zero interest, right? The other way to describe it is a free call option. Now, we've, I think, done a really good job executing on it. And the thing is ideas are great, but it also execution is the other piece. So we will just stand by for updates. And there's something important that was mentioned by Frank, and it's in the webcast, but I do want to highlight it. Again, we have the lowest G&A in the sector. If you look at it as a function of revenue, on a cash basis, we back all the share-based comp as well. So we could look like on dollars and cents, where do we stand in the industry? And we led the sector. It was 12% for us this quarter. And some of our peers, 40%, 54%. I'm not talking about COGS. I'm not talking about electricity. I'm not talking about data center costs. I'm talking about corporate G&A.
Controllable costs.
Corporate G&A, right? And so I don't want to turn this into a webcast, but I can't screen share. Okay. I do want to, highlight, we led the sector. So again, best in class performance, lowest cost on various metrics, whether you're looking at cost per exahash on a CapEx basis, which we talked about before, the call formally launched. But we've led the sector, and we'll see. There might be some industry analysts that might start putting out research along those lines. And then on an operating basis, we have the lowest G&A per Bitcoin mine. I think we're pushing well over 10 million revenue per employee based on our current ARR. So these are all the ingredients, I think, to when we were in New York at the NASDAQ 4-year anniversary. It was such a honor to be there. Frank, Gabe, and I were there in 2021 when HIVE went public on NASDAQ. And we had about, I think, a half dozen people, Frank, right? Nigel was there, Ian, Man, and Iggy were there. And, we do have a very high performance culture. So I believe we attract the best of the best. Not everybody can last, but that's kind of what you're like when you're playing on the A team. And I think that's what Gabriel Lamas was attracted to, right? Like the guy is, he's when you meet him, he's got a presence. He's got a very strong presence. Engineer. He actually worked at Onde, which is the utility company, the national utility company. So he had all the right DNA. I think he just needed the right opportunity to thrive. And this time around, we had him present at NASDAQ as well. His whole family flew up from Paraguay. We had 100 people at NASDAQ this time. In 2021, we had 6, right? And of those 6, Frank, Gabe, and I were the original 3, and now we had 100 people there. And it would have been great if you guys were there. I know it's not exactly convenient. We had guys from the buy side, guys
just
from
like to interject, Aydin. I think right now we have the longest standing CFO and CEO in Bitcoin mining.
Yeah.
I think everyone's been tossed out.
And you're the oldest public miner as well, by the way.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
Like the turnover for investors, they want stability. We have stability, and I'm very proud of it. What I didn't share with you is that when we did an event at NASDAQ, they never had so many people, and we invited kids. So some of the executives brought their kids, like myself, and all the kids were participating in the epicenter of capitalism. It was exciting, but we also had the vice minister from Paraguay, and we had the consulate general from Paraguay show up. And by the way, give you some interesting, every time I go back to Paraguay, I find something new I find really interesting. Paraguayans did not have to pay income taxes until 2009. So it's really an interesting country with the history of the state. So my trivia for today's interview.
Hey, we always love the trivia sessions from you, Frank. Now, I'm going to ask for some specifics again in relation to Paraguay here. Now, you guys have obviously done a phenomenal job growing out that facility. We actually heard from Bitfarms back when they owned that facility that the labor, the construction, and the timelines in South America are quite advantageous compared to North American construction. So my question is, post-Thanksgiving, which is coming up very quickly here, what is the plan with that Iguazu site? Is there the opportunity to eventually get more megawatts at that location or potentially keep the construction crews going?
Look up. We're growing. There'll be more exciting news. Stay tuned to this sequel. There's Batman and Superman coming, sequels 2 and 3.
It's the third time today I've been asked that question, Bryce, because I've been doing the analyst calls. And we have provided indications in past disclosure that there is more power available for us in Paraguay. Really, we want to focus on executing and delivering. When we say 300 megawatts in Paraguay, we own the land. These are live construction sites, PPA signed, deposits in place. And I'm not talking about today. I mean, obviously, Iguazu's almost done. Valenzuela construction is materially complete. We're going to be plugging in ASICs in Valenzuela, phase 3, come September, which is in a few weeks. But it's how we operate at HIVE. So once we have a project underway and on the go, expect photos, expect weekly updates. We put an exahash press release out every time we've hit an exahash. But we don't do like some of our other peers will be like, oh, we have a gigawatt in West Texas with like 0 color and it just sort of, all this handout. No, we don't do that. Directionally, yeah, we have more expansion capacity, but I think we really want to focus on demonstrating our expertise. And again, I say, because I feel we've walked the walk, we're the best pound for pound miner in the game, right? And I'm happy if anybody wants to debate that. So stay tuned for the 25 exahash, stay tuned for the stock to be re-rated. And we want to show that we could print money and ROI. And when there's accretive opportunities, it's all about making money, right? Like if you are not making money on your Bitcoin mining operations, meaning if you invest 100 million bucks, you better be making 150 or 200 million bucks net after a few years. Otherwise, you shouldn't even mine, and you just buy Bitcoin like Michael Saylor, go be a treasury company, right? But we want to provide an accretive edge. We want to have an adaptive and resilient operating business that delivers value for shareholders. So, and part of that is not falling over your skis and taking on too much at once, right?
In terms of Bitcoin mining, and we've had a few CEOs, we had one on today who said he doesn't see the Bitcoin mining industry lasting much longer. You know, it's challenging now, but it gets more challenging when we get to the next halving, when effectively margins are reduced again by another 50%. And you've got this difficulty factor as we're seeing the global hash rate probably not increasing as much as it was maybe earlier this year or last year, but it's still on the increase. I think it's getting close to that 1,000 exahash on a 7-day moving average, not on an individual day. What's your thought process as we approach that next halving in 2028? And looking, even though you've got sort of like a good power rate in Paraguay, but potentially you probably need a better power rate to sort of manage going through.
So Anthony, it's all mathematically ordained, right? Hash price is equal to electrical price times machine efficiency times 24. I put this on Twitter a long time ago. I called the bridge equation. I presented it in Vegas at the Bitmain WDMS. So the equalizer is machine efficiency, right? So as long as you ROI in your ASICs, right, and call that first year, and you're running them for 3 to 4 years, you will net make money. That's the ROI that we're talking about. So I know hash price will commodify with time as time approaches infinity and network hash rate. We know this, but on $1 per kilowatt hour basis right now, new generation gear is doing 15 cents a kilowatt hour, right? So you're always really measuring in dollar per kilowatt hour. That is what you need to be looking at, because if you're paying, say, a nickel all in to run your business, but you're doing 15 cents a kilowatt hour, well, there you go. There's a 65% gross mining margin. And we know that S23 is coming out next year. It's 9.5 joules a terahash. We were on stage. We signed a deal with Bitmain. So it's about, what are you paying? What's your lead time between capital deployed to ASICs hashing? And what is your net ROI? So I think that guys that just ran headfirst into this industry, deployed a bunch of capital, realized, oh no, we've destroyed a bunch of capital. We're never going to ROI on our investments. Tuck your tail, pivot, do HPC. You get a second chance at life. And it's, look, we're a data center company, and we'll always focus on what we think is the best use of capital. And we'll continue to invest where we see accretive opportunities. But that's not to say, by the way, we were the first company to have income from our HPC business on our P&L, right? 2 years ago, right? And we've grown that methodically, went from 1 to 20 million. When we were at 10 million, people doubted us, and we got to 15, and they're like, okay, maybe. Then we hit 20 a month ahead of schedule, right? So I think that both businesses are great. But you have to be smart with both of them, right? Like you could take on really bad debt in HPC as well. We've seen some companies take on double-digit debt, close to 20%, So I think that there's been a lot of capital markets hubris when there's been rapid expansion in HPC.
Yeah, some of these guys looked at more $200 million, paid 14% plus 4%. I mean, it's unbelievable what they spent. So we're more cautious, but I'm happy when I'm seeing for Buzz, it's got 3 people basically that's running the cost for that. And it's doing more than $7 million in revenue per employee. And it's going to scale. The data center we bought in Toronto to take that to tier 3, it's cookie cutter. It'll be, right now, we're positioned to be the largest sovereign data center in Canada. And so Greg Tavares is going to build that out for us, and it's still right now a very profitable business. But I think the energy costs in Paraguay have the potential to come down a penny in the next 2 years. But even at this price level, the cost of entry in our structure, we have something like 20 first-year engineers, 20, and they're so inexpensive because for job opportunity to be in engineering, being electrical, we're creating like a program that would be like an MBA program for them to get into the business. So when we take a look, we could never afford that in Texas. You could never do what we're doing in Paraguay, you couldn't do. And some of the other peers have said to us, they all thought that we wouldn't be where we are in scaling until the fall. And I and the team have just defied all that sort of negativity and executed on we're 6 weeks ahead of that scaling. And today we're thrilled, like Aydin said, if you can simply work back with the math and look at our HPC, we hit $1 million a day. And we have a key 25 people. And those 25 people manage and contract out to other jurisdictions that will employ the people and do that, because we want to be working on the software to monitor all the machines and to be able to pivot quickly. If you have 200 employees and you have to worry about all the employees in all those jurisdictions, and if the Bitcoin goes down and you have to do layoffs, we don't function that way. And I think that that's allowed us to stay lean and to be able to pivot here and pivot there. And we don't know, with all respect, the Bitcoin mining, there's such a negativity on it. And we just believe that it will, if you don't pivot, you don't move with it, you will become a big loser. You have to have this sort of fluid nature about it as it fast tracks the global ecosystem.
So in terms of, we've talked about the mining side now, let's focus a little bit on the high performance compute side. And it's great to see you've achieved that 20 million annualized run rates. And you have a target in 2026 of getting that to 100. Can you talk us through what's going to be required to get that sort of like 5x from where we are at the moment due to next year?
I would just quickly point out, there's a really nice photo of the Toronto data center in Frank's section. If you look at the webcast, there's a link. Go look at our press release. There's a link to the YouTube channel. And this is, by the way, it's an operating data center. It'll be a retrofit to liquid cooled, so we can run B300s out of there. And if you look at the capacity, current market prices, that'll add about 80 million ARR once that's retrofitted to run a little over 3,000 B300s. I mean, B300s will launch in Q1, but it's about a 9 to 12 month retrofit on that. But I would also add, we've been putting out press releases through Buzz that talk more about the sovereign and enterprise play. And we are giving a directional update on exciting things to come. The other thing to point out, which I think Frank did a great job illustrating, I mean, we're Canadian, right? Like Frank's in Texas for 30 years, but originally Toronto. And, Toronto has a bigger population than Chicago, by the way. Vector Institute, which is Jeffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI's stomping grounds, Toronto, right? So it's location-wise a very, very, very strategic data center. It is about land and power broadly, but location is also very important, right? So we were very happy to announce that. And I would say stand by for updates. The same way we've been updating the street as we built out Paraguay, we'll put out updates as we roll out the development and construction of that site. And stay tuned for more exciting updates on the sovereign and enterprise Buzz strategy.
I just add, you never know where you're going to learn something. So I've learned so much on Bitcoin mining and data centers, and then I'm an AI business. And in that journey, I took the first public company, Canada Public, that was for AI, for gold mining industry, because that's where I sort of grew up. So I launched another product earlier this year called War, and it's AI for the military build-out. And it's really interesting because you need to have semiconductors, you need to have data centers, The AI doesn't function without having data centers, and so the significance of it. And what you're seeing now is, since Putin invaded Ukraine, is a rippling effect on the value of our energy and our sovereignty. So Trump turns around and says he's going to shut down your AMD energy in Canada, or AWS, or whatever. All this stuff now is resonated around the world, that a sovereign data center is very important. And you know what else has happened for the data centers? Military spending, Anthony. One of my friends, they have the NATO ETF in the UK. It's grown like every time there's negative news in Eastern Europe, it goes 50 million goes into it. And now we've seen Germany going to go from 50 billion a year to $250 billion a year in military spending, to be 5% of their GDP. Canada goes from about 25 billion to 150 billion. Guess what? A big part of those budgets are data centers, sovereign data centers, because they want to have the value of that location. So that's one thing we found in Canada, to say, okay, this data, we're going to take this one, we're working on another one, because they're going to just become more valuable in national security and also data security. And who's really amplified that have been the Chinese. They basically put around their data centers, it looks like a military compound, all their data centers. And so I think HIVE is positioned in a secular bull market on the value of owning the electrical contract, the real estate. And we've seen the success of this with Irish Energy. Irish Energy never holds Bitcoin. They sell it all. And was this, I'm a Bitcoin, not a Bitcoin, their data center business. And their data center business was Bitcoin mining, to be able to now to get to AI. And they show up in IBD's growth stocks, in the top 50 stocks. So if you look at the big picture, the value of sourcing energy, and we can see this now with TeraWulf. They announced a deal with one of the big hyperscalers. So we can see a transaction announced with Google, see what it does, see what happens if it's announced with Microsoft, like OpenChat, and then OpenChat's related to CoreWeave, which is now related to Core Scientific. So all of a sudden, that value of that energy. So there's a big transition that we don't know in the next 4 years what the value of these data centers are going to be, except for they're going to trade higher. And it's not just because AI is cool, it's because it's now national security. And the military budgets around the world are growing dramatically. And the difference between China and America, or the UK's military budget, is that 50% of the UK's budget and Canada's budget and the US is for soldiers, is for military care, healthcare. In China, it's only 10%. So when you look at what the Chinese are spending, they're spending much more on weapons than what we are as a percentage of this budget. So we've seen an escalation. And what's key in that whole escalation? The value of your data centers. I rest my case.
And here's a fun fact for you all. You wouldn't have any data centers if it wasn't for Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who's 2 miles away from my house, teaching at the moment at Southampton University. He created the World Wide Web. One final question, and this is off the this is off the chart. We've obviously seen a massive input now of these Ethereum treasury companies come to the market. Now go back to 2022. You were one of the biggest producers of Ethereum, and in terms of revenues and margins, you were beating all the miners of that part of the industry. What's your thought process on companies now holding Ethereum as a treasury asset? Is it something that interests you, or is it, having had that experience of mining it for many years, where do you sit with regards to that type of company?
We made an investment in a new company that's going in that business, but it's not for us. We're proof of workers. We believe in the significance of things being validated, like gold. To make an ounce of gold, you need to have energy. To make a Bitcoin, you need to have energy and you need the system validated. So I would prefer to trust that mechanism than I would a bunch of Excel sheets on steroids holding your inventory back and forth trading for a coupon. That's just our vision. We think it's great, but we've made the right move. We sold all of Ethereum to plow into Bitcoin and hodl that, and that gap of the Ethereum to Bitcoin ratio only improved for us. And recently, it's only because of the ETF world that's sort of driven it up. But I don't think it's going to be the barn burner that they all talk about. But I do still see the negative, I share in the industry around the world, is old mindsets about Bitcoin mining. But some of these central bankers, like we experience in countries like Sweden, they are still functioning like the US was with Elizabeth Warren and the way they look at the industry. And Canada still hasn't embraced. They use the tax agency to try to go just to isolate against Bitcoin miners. We haven't seen that turn yet with the Genius Act, but we remain very optimistic that the Genius Act will start to permeate throughout the world. And then all of a sudden, this Bitcoin in a year from now will have a complete different spotlight on it. And the significance of it. So we remain very bullish that way, that we'd rather be long Bitcoin.
Yeah, very interesting. Always a great discussion with you two. We appreciate the time. I wanted to give you the opportunity to close out, congratulate you on a very successful quarter, and obviously all the accomplishments we've discussed today. So thanks again, guys, and I'll pass it back to you.
I think somebody said that Frank and I are the highest energy executive leadership team in the industry. So, we're happy to continue carrying the torch. It's like we look at what we've accomplished in the last 4 years, and I just think about the next 4 years, So,
always
cheers.
had operating profits.
Yeah.
Add that to the long list of credentials. You guys, appreciate the time. If you have any questions for the team at Hive, leave them in the comment section below. Hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. Gentlemen, we'll see you soon.